The independents in this election are actually creating an unpredictable set of circumstances. It's nearly impossible to know how they're going to vote. Too many things are in play. And so I think this will have three major effects upon the next 6 months of this election season. First, we're going to see a lot of variation in poll numbers. People are going to go up and down in the polls. That's going to continue. Second, we're going to see a fair amount of convergence toward a set of positions that don't necessarily please the extremes of both parties, but now come more to the center, especially around economic issues. And the third thing that's, I think, going to be most fascinating is we're going to see, as we get toward the national conventions in the summer, we're going to see new candidates potentially enter the race. This might be the first election in memory when we have conventions that produce possibly new candidates. So the economy is at the center of this election. Every debate, every discussion is about the economy. But what people don't always realize is that it's a two-way street. What the candidates are saying about the economy will affect our perception of the economy, and it will affect our policies. But also, as they're talking about the economy, investors and employers are also changing their policies in response to what they expect. People are forecasting the future in every single way. And so the discussion during the primary will affect how people operate in the economy and will affect the kinds of economy we're operating in. This means that a candidate Romney, if he becomes the nominee from the Republican Party, will probably persuade investors that the economy is going to look pretty similar 2 to 3 years from now. Romney might cut a little more, he might actually not increase taxes in certain areas, but he's not going to create radical transformation in the economy. Whereas someone like Ron Paul, who's talking about eliminating the Federal Reserve, changing the very structure of the American government, that would convince investors and convince employers that they will expect a very different future. So if you are a mortgage lender, and you think the Federal Reserve is going to go away, that's going to change the way you do your mortgage lending. So what happens during the primary season in terms of these discussions affects the economy we're living in now, not only after the election. And one final point on this, I think the longer it takes the Republicans to come up with a nominee, the more uncertainty that will create in the economy. So to some extent, the sooner they have a nominee, the sooner the economy will enter a more stable period in terms of expectations. It's quite common in American history for candidates to run on balancing the budget, on spending less, and on trying to cut taxes to stimulate the economy. This is not a new argument. In fact, Franklin Roosevelt, Mr. New Deal, ran in 1932 on balancing the budget. So this is a very common thing. Americans like to hear from their candidates that they're going to manage the economy in the same way we'd like to manage our households, where we don't spend more money than we have. But historically, almost without exception, every president on coming into office wants to have some new programs that he or she can put his stamp on. You want these programs because you believe in them. You want these programs because you think they're going to change the economy. And you want these programs because you want a historical legacy of your own. So it is unlikely at all that Romney or any other candidate will come into office and actually reduce spending. The likelihood is that they'll increase spending. And the likelihood is that they'll look for new sources of revenue. And the challenge for the next president, be it a second-term Obama or a Romney or whoever else, will be to find new revenue sources without calling them taxes. Defense spending is a very important part of the American economy. It's still not the largest part of government spending. We spend much more actually on entitlement programs, but it's the area where the president has the most control. It's very difficult to affect entitlement spending because it's set by Congress and obligations are made many years in advance. Defense spending is where the president has a lot of control. There's about $500 billion that can be moved one way or another in that budget. Mitt Romney is claiming that he'll spend more money because he wants a stronger defense, but the money is not there to spend. And it's unlikely that any future president, in the near future at least, will spend more money without a major crisis, creating a need and creating the space to do that. So it's hard to predict. But I would say under the present circumstances, it's unlikely we'll spend more. In fact, we're going to be cutting the defense budget quite considerably. We're going to have a smaller army. We're going to be investing less in new technology. But when the next crisis arises, what we will see is we will see an infusion of new money into the military. So this, we might say, is the historical law of military spending. The United States tends to spend less after long wars like Iraq, And then when the next crisis arises, we tend to then increase our spending very quickly. And that's likely to happen in those circumstances with the next president.